1958 Chevy Biscayne. Congratulations! You won World War II! And here's your reward, Korea! And a 1958 Chevy Biscayne. Is it a Cadillac? No. Is it a Buick? No. But at least it's not a Ford. Oh, look at its little fins and its twin torpedo taillights. It looks just like a Bel Air. In fact, that's what the owner gets at small car shows and gas stations. Is that a 57 Bel Air? No, it's a Biscayne. Well, that's a type of Bel Air. No, completely different car. Well, I like the Bel Air. And I'm so happy for you. 1958 Chevy Biscayne. Well, Francis, you gave life your best shot. But all the little opportunities you had, you waved off over the past 50 years. You could have joined that community beautification group, but you didn't. Because what's the point? Well, the point, Francis, was the owner of O'Leary Trucking and Logistics was also a member and was looking for someone with your skill set. And you could have taken that free calisthenics class and not only learned how basic exercise would make your knees and back hurt less, but also could have met your school's guidance counselor there, and that would have gotten your son preferential treatment, an extra time to finish his math tests, which would have led to better grades, better confidence, scholarships, and jobs. But you didn't do that because what's the point? So now, instead of living in a mid-century modern masterpiece in Gladwin and driving a Cadillac Series 62, you're living in a drafty Cape Cod in Boyertown and driving a Biscayne. To every day, turn, turn, turn. My balls in your wife's mouth, churn, churn. 1958 Biscayne. The official car of Salisbury steak covered in breadcrumbs and cream corn on the side, and Canadian Club for dinner. Chevy Biscayne, brought to you by sitting alone in a maroon living room, chain-smoking Lucky Strikes while an LP of Johnny Mathis's greatest hits flips back and forth on your automatic console record player. Your wife comes in and goes, but you can't understand her because your mind is back at
the Battle of Incheon,
where you kissed Marty Detweiler in the back of an amphibious landing craft. We'll get to the engine in a moment, because to say the Biscayne has this or that doesn't really mean much, because this is from an era where you could get almost anything you wanted in a car. Any engine you wanted, all you had to do was either have a firm, confident handshake with the sales manager or both be friends of Dorothy. You could even get a GM-branded foldable tissue holder that folds away when not in use. And I'm not talking about those miniature, weak, thin grandma tissues that are the size of playing cards. This holds a full box. And above that, you'll find an AM radio with 2 civil defense callouts. Civil defense was to Homeland Security what OSS was to the CIA. But civil defense was mostly volunteers and grew into the public lexicon during World War II and the Cold War when the U.S. faced invasion and later atomic warfare. During an emergency, all domestic radio broadcasts would issue a warning and then go off air. You were to tune your radio to either of these CD marks, either 1640 or 1240 kilohertz, which would broadcast essential information. Chevy Biscayne. Existential dread comes standard. How about driving? It goes left and right and goes forward and back. And if Alcoa Aluminum finds out about Marty Detweiler, you're going to lose your pension.
Okay, let's give her one. Here we go. Power. Come on, give it to me. Oh, wow. So when I said go fast, this is what you were dealing with.
Yeah, and this is a gentle hill compared to the first hill when you're like, okay, pass.
Are we already in second gear?
Yeah.
All right. But there she is.
But yeah.
She's taking it. There's an indicated 70, which means 60. Yeah.
Chevy Biscayne, sponsored by men who think the 50s was nothing but trad wives, meatloaf, and cream pies. When the 50s was actually polio, asbestos, leaded gasoline, and cars were steering heavier than the weight of existentialism. Because we're all gonna die, but the 1950s automotive safety standards meant you got to meet God sooner. The farther away we get from these Eisenhower lawn chair legends, the more our perception is distorted about how good these cars actually were. I admire them that they're still on the road, and I sometimes mistake those feelings of reverence for something more. But really, these cars are not that deep. And even they have some glaring design problems, not the least of which is that you can hit your knees on the windshield as you get in. Because the windshield is this far wrapped around. I mean, it's beautiful curved glass, don't get me wrong. But you have to remember to not come so far back. You have to keep your knees low and not swing your knees over too high, over my gigantic balls, as you step in. Anyway, even when classic American cars are in good condition, not every 50s car is nice. There's Cadillacs, and then there's everything else. And even when they're modified, you're still working within the limitations of whatever the car was when it was stock. Yes, I know we can body song, unless you're doing a complete rebuild and making a complete resto mod, and even then it's still almost good. Anyway, the base engine was a 235 cubic inch overhead valve inline 6. But this has the optional small block 283 V8, which makes 185 horsepower and 275 pound-feet of torque. Now that's a 2-barrel option. 4 barrels got you up to 230 horsepower. That's not, for its time, that's not too bad. I mean, my crazy taxi Ford Galaxy only makes 200 horsepower with its 352 cubic inch V8. Now Ty is currently running a Holley 4-barrel and an aftermarket intake manifold. Those are pretty much the only real modifications. Even the paint around the accessory plate appears to be factory matched. This is all paired to a 2-speed automatic power glide. And I like the power glide. I think power glide is a really decent transmission, even honest by today's standards. I mean, you got one gear for going and the other one to keep going. That's really it. Power glides are pretty good, as long as you're just cruising. I mean, you can build them up, but that's not really the point. I mean, you can, but I'm getting off point here. 1958 Chevrolet Biscayne. This is a poor man's Cadillac in search of the right pair of cargo shorts to fill its seats. Someone to park it outside of an old firehouse where they spend the afternoon playing bingo and never getting to say bingo. The Biscayne was a fleet car for people who wanted something nicer than a Del Rey, but couldn't make the Malibu happen, let alone the Bel Air. This is bare bones luxury, like a hipster Bel Air. It's cool, and I do think this is a cool car because you really can't do anything with it. It's appealing because I guess it's just confident to just only offer the AM radio. You know, I'm so cool I don't even need music. I don't need stereo, I just need weather in the ball game. How's traffic on the Northeast Extension? Oh great, an overturned bread truck on 476 at the Quakertown exit. Don't know what I'm talking about? Get porked, because everything west of the Ohio River doesn't matter to me. RCR is a Pennsylvania show. The Biscayne sits on a cross frame instead of a ladder frame, so it's lower to the ground than most cars from factory were, kind of like my 63 Galaxy that has an X-frame as well. So sometimes you're going to feel like you're floating, and other times you're going to be straining like a constipated walrus as you just try to cut the wheel without scraping the undercarriage on the pavement's fat bulge. Why does every parking lot have an unintentional fat bulge? I'm not talking about a speed hump. I'm talking about a parking lot fupa. A mound that just looks like macadam bunched up in one spot and the workers didn't smooth it out. And it's always in the most inconvenient places, as you're driving the most inconvenient car to encounter one. One of the benefits of a cheap car is convenience, because low cost is convenient. And in 1958, these went for about $2,000, which in 2025 is about $22,000. Dude, a 4-door, comfy station wagon with a V8 and a big trunk for $22,000 new? I mean, the steering wheel is going to go through your chest in an accident, but that just means you won't have to suffer the indignity of talking through a Game Boy in 1991. This model also marked the 50th anniversary of General Motors, which was founded September 16, 1908, and our volunteer Ty got it in 2008, which was the 50th anniversary of this car and the 100th anniversary of General Motors. So there's a lot of history here. And while history can sometimes work against you when old men are constantly comparing you to their glory days, GM is one of those companies that benefits from a long existence. Because people use memories of the past to overlook all the ways they're getting ramrodded now. I suppose while GM's cavalier days are in a cracked rear-view mirror, at least there are plenty of parts out there for their cars. That was the case here, as Ty explains it. Ty was supposedly having a quarter-life crisis and wanted a classic car. So he founded DeSoto. Hell yeah, Sam and Max, but it needed a lot of work. Then he found this, realized he could get parts for it anywhere, and took it home. And that's why GM is 117 years deep in America's velvet fanny pack. Parts availability is convenient, and convenience will take you farther than you knew you could go. Granted, there have been some global supply chain issues, topical comment, of late that seem to be hampering the parts market for GM, so they might not even have that going for them pretty soon. But there's always aftermarket, and this Biscayne is still running. So that has to count for something. And I know that there's a classic car curve when it comes to evaluating something like this, because standards then don't look like the way they do now. So the Biscayne deserves some grace, but even in the 50s, it's hard to imagine that this is something you'd choose if you had any other option, because it sits, this is maybe lower middle class. You just got out of a brownstone. This is maybe a Chevy Caprice Classic rolling around in 1997. This thing wasn't aspirational when it was new, and within 10 years, it was seen as so outdated. By 1968, this would have been buried amongst all the muscle cars and also four-door cars that were trying to be muscle cars. But I understand owning non-aspirational cars. Or cars that are cute and attractive, but that you don't have to worry about messing up. Like when I owned a POW. It was way smaller than this, got way less horsepower, but it was more fun. And I miss all the time in it because it was fun. I was concentrated on enjoying the car, not really taking care of it. And that's what's going on with this Biscayne. It's an old car from the 50s. Either it's running or it's not. And when it's running, have a good time. Don't worry about oil consumption or how hot the engine is getting. Is it seized? No, it's not. Keep driving. Is there transmission fluid in the transmission? Yes. Is it leaking out? A little. Do you have more? Of course I do. ATF Type F. Is it leaking oil? From many places. Do you have extra in the trunk? Yes. Keep driving. You don't have to be depressed. You don't have to surrender to suburban malaise. Even though this car may have been for old men who peaked in high school and ran out the clock, rewriting scenarios in the shower with comebacks they should have used. The Biscayne is different now. Even though it was built for people who felt like giving up, now it's a car for people who don't want to. To use a kinder term, it feels like no longer settling. We don't have to grade on a curve if we're placing a classic car in context, because the car itself gets a new life. It continues charging on here in 2025, and nothing is stopping this machine. Like Mandatory Fun Day said, I exist out of spite. And that's what I love about classic American cars. They just don't die until the earth itself consumes it. As long as there's structural rigidity in that metal, the car will survive. So I salute you, Ty. Keep fighting the good fight with this machine. It's not a Bel Air, it's not a Cadillac, but screw it. It's still fun.